It was recently my birthday, and I've decided to treat myself. We are going to make some A5 Wagyu here. This is Japanese beef. Wagyu means Japanese beef. But this is A5. Look at that absolutely delicious marbling. The butcher I get it from certifies that it is A5. You can tell based on the look, but also here's the certificate of authenticity. Tells you all about the cow. Very nice. The steak itself, though, here, you have the ribeye fillet in the middle. It is the part we're going to cook today. You have the cap around the outside, which I'm also going to eat, but not part of this video. The bottom part here is the tail and where it connects to the rib bone, but the ribeye fillet in the middle is what we're currently going to eat. I'm going to butcher this up a little bit. You can get your butcher to do it for you. I wanted the whole ribeye complete here, but the fat pieces we're going to cut off. If there is nice red meat on them, we're going to eat them. These little are just fat pieces we're going to render down in the pan, and I'm going to cook the steak in its own fat. No other oils needed, just the rendering fat, so it's very easy. But separating the ribeye fillet from the fat cap to the tail, the rib cap, is all very easy. It separates, as you can see here, very simply. It pulls off through the fat and the tissue, and it separates very nicely. I'm not really having to cut much. I'm really just separating these pieces out. But there you go. You're left with a beautiful ribeye fillet. This thing is gorgeous. The fat is so beautiful. I'm going to cut a little bit of that extra off, but the rest is just going to render down beautifully in the pan. Look at that. That is just marbled perfection. This is going to be absolutely delicious. This is about $99 a pound, so it's not cheap by any means, but it's worth every dollar. You can trim that even more if you wanted to, but that's not necessary. I'm going to cut off any other parts of meat I see from any fat that I could then cook up separately. But we're ready to go on this. We're just going to very lightly salt these, the pieces that we're going to eat. You don't need to really use pepper on Wagyu. In Japan, I think they do not use pepper. I don't like pepper on my steak really in general. I like to really just season it with salt. And that's all you need. The main thing here is getting your pan hot enough. You want to sear this and get a really nice crust on it, but you do not want to thoroughly cook this meat. The rarer is usually the better. If that's not for you, that's totally fine. But we're going to render down this fat in this pan. I'm just going to move it around as if I'm melting butter, and look at how beautiful that is. This is what we're going to cook this steak in. If you want to cook it well done, go right ahead. I don't really care what you do. If that's how you enjoy it, I'm not going to tell you to not enjoy your food the way you want to cook it. But laying it here down in the pan, a little bit of smoke is fine. You want to cook this hard and hot. We really want to get a nice crust on both sides. It's not super thick. It's probably about 3/4 of an inch. So we do not want to cook it all the way through the meat. It had been sitting out at room temperature, so it's not cold. It will be warm, but it will be not really well by any means. It should be fairly rare on the inside. Once you're ready to flip it, after about a minute or two, all the fat renders out beautifully, and look at that crust. It's absolutely perfect. It doesn't stick at all. The fat that renders out of it really helps give it a beautiful crust, a beautiful brown texture, and that's so vital. The fat around the outsides that you could have trimmed off, I chose to leave on, are going to curl up a little bit. That is also totally fine. If you want to just tilt the pan and kind of get them in there, also totally fine. But about a minute or two on each side, and this is really good to go. Feel it. I can tell it still has that great raw middle. And now I'm going to pull it out, and I'm going to let it rest. If you want to cook it further, go right ahead. I am going to throw on a glove. Just it is hot. Not any other reason. I just want to be able to hold the meat. And here's the first piece. Look at that. It is beautiful. It is rare. It is crispy on the outside. And that fat has rendered absolutely perfectly. One of the greatest bites of food. It is very fatty, though. So I'm going to show you my tip, which is what they do in Japan also. But I'm just going to cut these up into nice strips. We're just eating this as a snack. This isn't like a full-on dinner. It is very fatty. A whole meal of this is overwhelming. So you do need to cut it with heat, spice, some sort of element to really get through acidity. I am going to use a little bit of salt extra on the top, which is going to help with a little bit of that fattiness, but also wasabi. Putting some wasabi on the plate and having it with each bite is going to cut through that fat very well. It's what they do in Japan. They know what they're doing with this beef. And now we're just going to dive in. I'm going to use chopsticks to keep this authentic, but this is truly some of the best meat I've ever had in my life. I've been lucky enough to eat Wagyu before. I've never made it like this at home before, but that was absolutely delicious. The wasabi goes a long way, and this was just perfection.